I'm Ella, 27 female. I live, or rather, I used to live in a quiet suburban house with my parents and my younger sister, Isabel. By day, I'm a senior UX/UI designer, working remotely for a major tech firm, a job that pays well but demands a lot of my creative energy. For years, I believed I was just the responsible older daughter, contributing to the household while saving up for my own place. It turns out I wasn't just contributing. I was the entire foundation, and they were about to find out what happens when you knock out the main pillar. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Growing up, our family had a simple, unspoken dynamic. Isabel was the sun, and I was a planet orbiting her, expected to provide warmth but never to cast a shadow. Izzy, 4 years my junior, was the golden child. She was radiant, effortlessly charming, and everything she touched seemed to turn to gold. She got straight A's, was the lead in every school play, and had a smile that could disarm a bomb. My parents, Robert and Linda, orbited her just as much as I was expected to. They weren't bad people, not in the overt, villainous sense. They were just biased. My dad, a high school history teacher, saw Izzy as a prodigy, a reflection of his own intellectual aspirations. My mom, a quiet woman who worked as a librarian's assistant, saw in Izzy the social grace and popularity she never had. I, on the other hand, was the practical one, the quiet one. While Izzy was rehearsing lines, I was in my room teaching myself how to code. While she was at prom, I was building a portfolio of design projects. My success was different. It was quiet, digital, and to my parents, completely incomprehensible. They didn't understand what a user experience designer did. To them, my job was just playing on the computer, a hobby that somehow paid the bills. They never asked about my projects, my career goals, or the stress of managing international clients. But they could recite Izzy's pre-med course schedule from memory and tell you every detail of her volunteer work at the local clinic. This dynamic became cemented when I graduated from college. I landed a great job right away, and since it was remote, my parents convinced me to stay home. "Just for a year or two, Ella," my dad had said, patting my shoulder. "Save up a good deposit. Why throw money away on rent?" It sounded logical, responsible, so I agreed. I started transferring a significant amount of money to their joint account every month. At first, it was for rent and groceries. Then it became a contribution for bills and utilities. Soon, I was just transferring a flat sum, nearly 70% of my income, because they told me it was easier for managing the household budget. I was young and naive, and I trusted them. I was proud to be helping, to be the responsible daughter who could ease my parents' financial burdens. The house ran like a well-oiled machine, and I was the fuel. The fridge was always stocked with Izzy's favorite organic snacks. The utilities were never late. When the water heater broke, I was the one who transferred the extra money to get it fixed immediately. When Izzy needed a new laptop for her pre-med courses, a top-of-the-line model appeared on her desk, a gift from Mom and Dad. I knew, of course, where the money had really come from, but I said nothing. Pointing it out felt petty, like I was trying to take credit. I just wanted to be a part of the family, and if being the silent provider was my role, I played it to the best of my ability. My presence in the house became almost atmospheric. I existed in the background. I'd be on a conference call in my room, making decisions for a 6-figure project, and my mom would knock on the door to ask if I could drive Izzy to her friend's house. I'd come out for dinner, exhausted after a 10-hour workday, and the conversation would be entirely about Izzy's day. A funny comment a professor made, a difficult concept in her anatomy class, the drama with her study group. I would try to chime in, talking about a design challenge I'd overcome, and my dad would nod vaguely before turning back to Izzy. "So, about that professor," he'd say, and just like that, I'd be invisible again. My friend Jenna saw it clearly. We meet for coffee once a week, my one escape from the suffocating atmosphere of the house. "It's not normal, Ella," she told me more than once. "You're not their daughter, you're their live-in ATM, they don't see you." I'd always defend them. "They're just not tech-savvy," I'd argue. "They don't get my world, and they're stressed about money. I'm happy I can help." Jenna would just shake her head, a worried look in her eyes. "Helping is one thing," she said quietly. "Being erased is another." The adoration for Isabel reached its peak in the months leading up to our birthdays. Mine is in early October and hers is 2 weeks later. It was the year Izzy was turning 22 and I was turning 27. The buzz around Izzy's birthday started in August. "We have to do something big for her," my mom said at dinner one night. "Graduating soon, heading to medical school, it's a milestone." My dad agreed enthusiastically. "She deserves the world," he declared. I watched them, a small, familiar knot tightening in my stomach. For my 26th birthday the year prior, they had gotten me a new office chair, which I later realized I had indirectly paid for myself. It was a practical gift, they'd said. This year, the whispers were about a trip, a big one. Izzy had always dreamed of going to Europe. She'd drop hints constantly, sighing over pictures of Paris and Rome. My parents would exchange knowing glances, and I knew what was coming. I knew it would be extravagant, and I knew exactly whose bank account would make it possible. Still, a foolish part of me hoped. I hoped that this year, for my 27th birthday, they would see me. Maybe not with a grand gesture, but with a thoughtful one. Something that said, "We know who you are, Ella. We see you." I was a fool. I had spent years funding the pedestal my sister stood on, and I never once realized that from their perspective, the only reason I was on the ground was so I could hold it steady for her. The silence in the house was comfortable for them because my contributions made no noise. My achievements were pixels on a screen they didn't understand, while my sisters were tangible, loud, and most importantly, something they could brag about to their friends. I was the foundation, buried underground, essential but unseen. And the ground was about to shake. My birthday arrived on a crisp October Tuesday. It started, as it always did, with a quiet acknowledgement. My mom left a single cupcake on the kitchen counter with a candle stuck in it. "Happy birthday, sweetie," she said, giving my shoulder a quick squeeze before rushing off to work. My dad wished me a happy birthday via text message filled with emojis that felt more like an obligation than a genuine sentiment. There was no party planned, no special dinner. It was a weekday, after all. My 27th birthday was treated with the same level of importance as taking out the recycling. I worked all day, fielding calls and pushing pixels, the solitary cupcake a sad little monument on my desk. That evening, my friend Jenna insisted on taking me out. We went to a nice Italian restaurant, and for a few hours I felt celebrated. She gave me a thoughtful gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of high-quality drawing pens. "For your non-digital ideas," she said with a warm smile. It was perfect. It showed she knew me, that she saw the part of me that existed beyond a screen. It was a stark contrast to what was waiting for me at home. When I got back, my family was gathered in the living room. It looked like they had waited for me. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe they had a surprise after all. My dad stood up holding a small, flat envelope. "Here you go, Ella. Happy birthday," he said, his tone flat. I opened it. Inside was a $20 gift card to a generic chain coffee shop. Beside it, tucked into the card, was nothing, just the card. "Thanks," I murmured, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. I had transferred thousands of dollars to their account just last week. $20. It felt like a joke. But the real gift was yet to come. "Now, Ella," my dad began, settling into his armchair and adopting his signature lecture mode posture. "Your mother and I have been talking. We know you've been feeling a bit distant lately. You're always cooped up in your room with that computer." I stared at him, baffled. My computer was my career, the very thing keeping this house afloat. "We feel you're not appreciating the family dynamic," he continued, completely oblivious to the irony. "You have a roof over your head, food on the table. You don't have to worry about rent or bills like your friends do. We think you need to learn a little more gratitude." The words hit me like a physical blow. Gratitude. I was pouring my life force, my earnings into this family, and I was being lectured on gratitude because I didn't smile enough at the dinner table. I looked at my mom, who was nodding in agreement, and at Izzy, who was examining her fingernails, feigning indifference. My throat felt tight. I couldn't speak. All I could do was nod. "You're right," I said, the words tasting like ash. I'll work on that. The smile I gave them was brittle, a thin sheet of ice over a raging sea of hurt. Pleased with my compliance, my dad smiled, the lecture concluded. My birthday was officially over. 2 weeks later, the atmosphere in the house was electric. It was Izzy's birthday, and the difference was staggering. The day was a whirlwind of activity. Balloons bobbed in every room. A mountain of presents was piled on the dining table. My parents were practically vibrating with excitement. They were throwing a big family party that evening to celebrate their precious daughter. I was expected to help, of course. I spent the morning picking up the cake, arranging decorations, and setting out plates, all while a storm brewed inside me. The party was in full swing by 7 p.m. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the house, their laughter echoing off the walls. The main event, of course, was the gift presentation. Izzy sat in the center of the living room, a literal throne, while my dad stood before the adoring crowd. As you all know, he began, his voice thick with emotion, our Isabelle is one of a kind. She's smart, beautiful, and she's going to be a doctor who saves lives. She has worked so hard, and she deserves the absolute world. He paused for dramatic effect, then presented her with a large, beautifully wrapped box. Izzy tore it open, her eyes wide. Inside was a custom-made travel binder, the front embossed with her name. She opened it and a collection of documents spilled out. Plane tickets, hotel reservations, train passes, a detailed 3-week itinerary for a tour of Europe, Paris, Rome, Barcelona, Amsterdam. It was an all-expenses-paid trip of a lifetime. Izzy shrieked with joy, tears streaming down her face as she leaped up to hug my parents. "Oh my God, I can't believe it," she cried. My dad hugged her tightly, his voice cracking as he said, "You deserve the world, sweetheart, and this is just a little piece of it." The whole family erupted in applause. I stood at the back of the room, invisible. The $20 gift card in my wallet felt like it was burning a hole through my jeans. The lecture on gratitude rang in my ears, mocking me. I watched my father beam with a pride he had never, not once, shown for me. I watched my mother weep with a joy I had never been the source of. They had given my sister the world, a world that I had paid for. Every flight, every hotel, every fancy dinner she was about to enjoy, it was all funded by my late nights, my stressful client meetings, my playing on the computer. Something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. The hope, the desire for their approval, the years of quiet resentment, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They didn't see me. They would never see me. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource, a utility, and my purpose was to facilitate my sister's happiness. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. I just smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, but it wasn't one of happiness. It was a smile of liberation. While everyone was fawning over Izzy and her grand tour, I slipped back to my room. I didn't pack everything, just the essentials. My work laptop, its charger, my external hard drives, my wallet, and my car keys. I grabbed the leather journal Jenna had given me. Everything else was just stuff. It could be replaced. My dignity, however, could not. I walked out of that house without a single person noticing. The sound of their joyful celebration was the soundtrack to my escape. The invisible daughter was finally, truly, gone. The drive away from the house felt surreal. The sound of the party faded behind me, replaced by the low hum of my car's engine and the frantic thumping of my own heart. I had no destination in mind, just a powerful, instinctual need to put distance between myself and that house. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but my mind was eerily calm. The decision wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a logical conclusion. I was a variable in an equation that no longer made sense. It was time to remove myself. My first call was to Jenna. I pulled into a deserted parking lot, the fluorescent lights of a closed supermarket casting long shadows around me. "Jenna," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "can I stay with you for a few days? I left." There was no hesitation on her end. "Of course. Are you okay? Where are you?" I gave her my location, and she told me to come straight over. The unwavering support in her voice was the first real warmth I had felt all day. Jenna's apartment was a sanctuary. It was small and cozy, filled with books and plants and the comforting scent of chamomile tea she immediately started brewing for me. She didn't press for details right away. She just took my small bag, pointed me to her comfortable couch, and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. "Whatever happened," she said softly, "you're safe here." I finally let myself break down, the tears I had been holding back since my own pathetic birthday celebration finally falling. I told her everything: the gift card, the lecture on gratitude, the grand European tour for Izzy, my dad's gushing speech. I explained how I had just walked out, taking nothing but my work equipment. Jenna listened patiently, her expression hardening as I spoke. When I was finished, she didn't offer platitudes. She offered validation. "Good," she said, her voice firm. "You did the right thing, Ella. It was long overdue. They weren't treating you like a daughter, they were treating you like a grant they never had to apply for." Hearing her put it so bluntly solidified my resolve. She was right. I had been funding a lifestyle, not contributing to a family. The next morning, I woke up on her couch feeling groggy but resolute. My phone had a few missed calls from my mom from late the previous night, followed by a single text. "Where are you? Izzy was worried when she didn't see you to say goodnight." The mention of Izzy was a calculated move, an attempt to use my sister as bait to pull me back in. It didn't work. For the first time, it had the opposite effect. I felt nothing but cold detachment. I texted back a simple, non-committal reply. Decided to stay at a friend's place. Needed some space. I knew this vague response would buy me some time. They would assume I was just being moody, that I'd cool off and come home in a day or two. They had no idea that I was never coming back. With Jenna's help, I spent the next 2 days executing a quiet, systematic extraction of my life from theirs. The first and most critical step was finances. I logged into my bank account, the one I used for my salary deposits. Then I logged into the joint account I shared with my parents, the one I had been blindly funneling money into for years. For the first time, I didn't just transfer money in, I started digging through the statements. I stayed up late into the night, a pot of coffee brewing, as I meticulously went through years of transactions. What I found made my blood run cold. It was so much worse than I had imagined. But that was an investigation for another moment. The priority was cutting them off. I changed my direct deposit information with my employer, redirecting my entire salary to a new, personal account I opened online. I then went to my old personal account and set up an automated transfer. But instead of the massive sum I usually sent them, I set it to transfer exactly $1 per month. This was a deliberate, strategic move. A $0 transfer might be flagged as an error, but a $1 transfer would go through, ensuring the link between the accounts remained active for my records but providing them with nothing. It was a small, petty act, but it felt immensely satisfying. Next, I tackled the logistical nightmare of my physical belongings. I couldn't just show up at the house. My parents would be there, ready with a guilt trip or another lecture. So, I hired a small, local moving company that specialized in discreet moves. I called them and explained the situation, emphasizing the need for speed and efficiency. I timed it perfectly. I knew my dad was at work, my mom was at the library, and Izzy was at university. I met the movers at the house, used my key to let them in, and directed them to my room. In less than an hour, they had packed up my entire life. My clothes, my books, my art supplies, my ergonomic chair they'd so graciously gifted me. They even took my bed. I left the room completely empty, a hollowed-out space that mirrored how I had felt for so long. The only thing I left behind was the $20 coffee shop gift card, placed squarely in the middle of the bare floor. As the movers loaded the last box into the truck, I took a final look around. The house I grew up in no longer felt like home. It was just a building, a stage for a play in which I had been miscast. There was no sadness, no nostalgia, just a profound sense of relief, like taking off a pair of shoes that were 2 sizes too small. I had the movers take everything. To a storage unit I had rented that morning. I would sort through it later. For now, all I needed was my laptop and a place to work. Jenna had already cleared out her spare room for me, turning it into a temporary office. That evening, my phone buzzed again. It was my dad. I let it go to voicemail. The message he left was dripping with false concern and paternalistic authority. Ella, this has gone on long enough. Your mother is worried sick. Whatever teenage tantrum you're having, it's time to end it. Come home, we need to talk. A teenage tantrum. At 27 years old, he still didn't get it. He didn't see me as an adult, an independent professional who had made a conscious decision. He saw me as a petulant child who had run away from her responsibilities. The irony was suffocating. His talk would just be another lecture, another session of him telling me how I should feel and what I should do. But he was no longer in a position to lecture me. He just didn't know it yet. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. The echo in my empty room was just the beginning. The real silence, the financial silence, was about to descend. Holed up in Jenna's spare room, surrounded by the comforting chaos of my hastily packed life, I dove headfirst into the one thing I could control: data. With my work laptop set up and a steady supply of caffeine, I launched a full-scale forensic audit of my own life. I was no longer just a hurt daughter. I was an investigator, and the crime scene was years of my family's financial records. I requested full bank statements for the joint account, going back to the day I first started contributing. As the PDF files loaded, I felt a knot of dread and anticipation tighten in my stomach. I knew it would be bad. I just hadn't grasped the scale of the deception. The first thing I did was create a spreadsheet. I listed my monthly contributions on one side, a figure that started at a reasonable $1,000 a month and had ballooned to over $5,000 over the past 2 years as my career advanced. On the other side, I started categorizing their expenditures from the joint account. The mortgage payments were there, as expected. So were the utilities, property taxes, and car insurance. These were the things they had told me my money was for, the household expenses I had agreed to cover. If it had stopped there, it would have been an unfair but understandable arrangement. It did not stop there. As I scrolled through months and years of transactions, a pattern of systematic exploitation emerged. There were thousands of dollars spent at high-end department stores under clothing, but I hadn't received a new piece of clothing from them in years. These were for Izzy's wardrobe, her closet full of designer jeans and boutique dresses. There were weekly charges at expensive organic grocery stores, stocking the kitchen with the specialty items Izzy preferred, while I usually ate leftovers at my desk. There were charges for Izzy's sorority dues, her spring break trip to Mexico last year, her textbooks, her car detailing. My money wasn't just supplementing their income. It was funding a lavish lifestyle for my sister, one my parents presented to the world as a product of their own success. But the discovery that truly broke me was the mortgage. I had always assumed my contribution was just paying the monthly bill. But as I cross-referenced the payment amounts with the official statements from the mortgage lender, which I found in a folder of scanned documents I had access to, I saw the truth. My parents had refinanced the house 2 years ago, taking out a significant amount of equity. They had used that money for 2 things: a brand new SUV for my dad and a family vacation to Hawaii, a vacation I had been too busy with a major project to attend. They told me they had saved up for it. The truth was, I had paid for it. Not only that, but my massive monthly contributions weren't just covering the mortgage, they were aggressively paying it down. They were on track to own the house, a major asset, outright in less than 10 years, entirely on my dime. I was building their wealth, their retirement, with no acknowledgement and certainly no stake in the outcome. The final, most insulting discovery came when I looked at their personal accounts. I didn't have direct access, but I could see the transfers from the joint account. Every month, my parents were paying themselves an allowance from my money. They were transferring hundreds of dollars each to their private savings accounts before the mortgage was even paid. They weren't just living off me, they were profiting from me. They were building their own nest egg, using my income while lecturing me about being grateful for a roof over my head. A roof that I was, for all intents and purposes, buying for them. The spreadsheet in front of me was a horrifying testament to their deceit. It was a map of my own exploitation, detailed in dollars and cents. The anger I felt was a cold, quiet rage. It wasn't the explosive anger of a shouting match. It was the focused, methodical anger of a designer identifying a fatal flaw in a system. and I was going to fix it. The data didn't lie. I had contributed over $200,000 to that household in 5 years. $200,000. The number was so large it seemed unreal. The European trip for Izzy wasn't a grand, one-time gesture. It was just another routine withdrawal from the Bank of Ella. Armed with this information, my perspective shifted. I was no longer just escaping an emotionally toxic environment. I was extricating myself from a situation of severe financial abuse. My quiet departure wasn't a teenage tantrum. It was a necessary act of self-preservation. They hadn't just taken my money, they had stolen my future. The down payment I thought I was saving for, it was gone, absorbed into their mortgage, their cars, their vacations. The life I was supposed to be building for myself had been secretly funneled into building theirs. Jenna came home from work to find me hunched over my laptop, the screen filled with charts and numbers. I didn't need to say a word. She looked at my face, then at the spreadsheet, and she understood. "Oh, Ella," she whispered, her voice full of a sorrow that mirrored my own. "It's a lot worse than we thought, isn't it?" I just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. This wasn't just about a favorite child and a neglected one. This was calculated. It was years of deliberate deception. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew where the money came from, and they knew they were hiding the full extent of it from me. They had built their comfortable life on a foundation of lies, and I was the one who had been unknowingly supplying the materials. The money trail didn't just lead back to my bank account. It led back to a fundamental betrayal of trust that could never be repaired. The rage and hurt from my discoveries coalesced into a singular, driving purpose: to build a fortress around my life so impenetrable that they could never touch it or me again. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It wasn't about hurting them for the sake of it. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming the future they had stolen from me, piece by piece. I dubbed it Operation Financial Freedom. And with Jenna as my strategic advisor, I began to execute my plan with the same precision I applied to my design projects. My first step was to seek professional advice. I knew I was in over my head with the legal and financial implications. Jenna recommended a lawyer who specialized in financial disputes and a certified financial planner. The consultations were expensive, but I now saw them as a necessary investment in my new life. I walked into the lawyer's office with my spreadsheet, my bank statements, and a timeline of events. She listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each detail I shared. "This is a clear case of financial exploitation," she said, her voice firm and reassuring. "While recovering the money you voluntarily contributed to a joint account is difficult, we can take immediate steps to legally and financially separate you from them, ensuring they have no future claim on your income or assets." Following her advice, I drafted a formal letter. It was cold, clinical, and devoid of emotion. It stated that I had moved out permanently, that I would no longer be contributing to the joint household account, and that all future communication should be directed through her office. We sent it via certified mail, requiring a signature upon delivery. This was no longer a family spat. It was a formal declaration of independence. The lawyer also advised me to check my credit report. To my horror, I discovered 2 credit cards I didn't recognize, both opened within the last year, with me listed as an authorized user. My mother had evidently used my personal information. The balances weren't huge, but the breach of trust was absolute. We immediately filed a report and had my name removed, freezing my credit as a precaution. The fortress walls were going up, brick by brick. Next, I met with the financial planner. She was a kind, no-nonsense woman who looked at my income and my story and saw not a victim, but a powerful earner who had been temporarily derailed. "All right, Ella," she said, pulling out a whiteboard. "They took your past. Let's build your future." For the first time in years, I felt a surge of genuine excitement. We mapped out a real budget, one that wasn't centered on someone else's mortgage. We created a retirement plan, opening a 401(k) and a Roth IRA. We outlined a realistic savings plan for a down payment on my own home, a goal that now felt achievable, not some far-off dream. Seeing my income, my money, being allocated to my goals, my future, was revolutionary. It felt like I was breathing clean air after years in a smoke-filled room. While the legal and financial gears were turning, I had to find a new place to live. Staying with Jenna was wonderful, but I needed my own space to truly start over. I spent every evening after work scouring apartment listings. I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in a modern building downtown, closer to the city's vibrant core and miles away from the quiet, suffocating suburbs. It had huge windows, a small balcony, and a spare corner that would be perfect for my home office. It was more expensive than I had planned, but I realized I could easily afford it now that I wasn't funding 3 other adults. I signed the lease a week after moving out of my parents' house. The day I moved my belongings from the storage unit into my new apartment was monumental. As I unpacked my books, my clothes, and my art supplies, I felt like I was unpacking myself. I bought new furniture, choosing every piece to fit my own taste, not to match someone else's decor. I bought a ridiculously comfortable sofa, a sleek new desk, and a set of beautiful ceramic mugs for my morning coffee. My home was a reflection of me, and only me. It was quiet, peaceful, and entirely mine. During this time, the calls and texts from my family became increasingly frantic. They had clearly received the lawyer's letter. My mother left tearful voicemails, begging me to stop this nonsense and think about the family. My dad left angry ones, accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful, threatening too. Well, he didn't seem to know what he could threaten me with anymore. The power dynamic had shifted, and his blustering was just noise. Izzy sent a few texts that were a masterclass in passive aggression. "Hope you're okay," one read. "Mom is a wreck. We're all just really worried about you." They were still trying to manipulate me, to guilt me into returning to my designated role as the family ATM. I didn't reply to any of them. I forwarded the more aggressive messages to my lawyer and blocked their numbers. My fortress needed a gate, and it was now firmly closed. I knew the financial shoe was about to drop. The first of the month was approaching. The mortgage payment would be due. The car payments, the utility bills, the credit card statements from Izzy's shopping sprees, they were all about to land in their mailbox, and for the first time in 5 years, the account they would draw from would be nearly empty. All it contained was the single dollar I had so graciously deposited. I didn't know exactly when they would notice. Maybe they'd get an alert for a failed payment. Maybe they'd see a letter from the bank. I didn't dwell on it. I was too busy building my new life. I had a job I loved, a beautiful new home, and a future that was finally my own. They had made their choices. They had built their gilded cage and expected me to fund it forever. What they failed to realize was that I wasn't just the funding. I was also the one holding the key. The first of the month came and went with an almost deafening silence. For 3 days, I heard nothing. I imagined the letters arriving at their house, the crisp white envelopes with red past due notices. I pictured my father logging into the bank account, expecting to see the comfortable cushion my salary provided, only to be met with a balance of $1. The thought didn't bring me joy, exactly. It brought a quiet, grim sense of validation. This was not an act of revenge, it was an act of consequences. The call finally came on the evening of the 4th. I was in my new apartment, sitting on my new sofa, sketching in the journal Jenna had given me. An unknown number flashed on my screen. I had a feeling I knew who it was. They had likely realized their own numbers were blocked. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and answered, putting the call on speaker. "Ella," the voice was my mother's, but it was a version I had never heard before. It was thin, trembling, and stripped of all its usual passive-aggressive confidence. It was the voice of pure panic. "Hello, Mom," I said, my tone even and calm. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. I would not yell, I would not cry, I would be a gray rock. "Ella, thank go." The mortgage payment, it didn't go through," she stammered, the words tumbling out. "And the car payment was declined. The bank is sending us alerts. There's no money in the account. Did something happen? Did you lose your job?" The genuine confusion in her voice was almost laughable. It had not even occurred to her that I had intentionally stopped paying. In her world, my income was as reliable and natural as the sunrise. "No, Mom, I didn't lose my job," I stated calmly. My job is going great. My salary was deposited on time into my new bank account, the one you don't have access to. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. Then, another voice came on the line, louder, angrier. It was my father. What is the meaning of this, Ella? Is this some kind of game? Your mother is having a panic attack. You can't just do this. We have bills to pay. Yes, you do, I agreed, my voice remaining level. You have a mortgage to pay, you have car payments, you have Izzy's tuition and her credit card bills. You have those bills. They are not my responsibility. Responsibility, he sputtered, his voice rising in disbelief. You're part of this family, you live under this roof. No, Dad, I don't, I corrected him gently. I haven't lived under your roof for almost a week now. I have my own apartment, I pay my own rent, I buy my own groceries, and I am building my own future with my own money. An apartment? You moved out. My mother's voice was a shocked whisper. The reality was finally beginning to sink in. I wasn't just staying at a friend's house. I was gone. This is because of Isabel's birthday trip, isn't it? My dad sneered, his panic twisting into accusation. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of your sister. I can't believe how petty and selfish you are being, punishing the whole family because you didn't get a fancy enough gift. This was the moment where all the years of being unseen, unheard, and unappreciated came to a head. The calm I had maintained finally cracked, but it didn't erupt into rage. It sharpened into a blade of ice-cold truth. Jealousy has nothing to do with it, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. This is about the $20 gift card you gave me for my 27th birthday, followed by a lecture about gratitude. It's about the fact that the fancy gift you gave Izzy, the 3-week trip to Europe, was paid for with my money. Just like her car was paid for with my money. Just like her tuition, her clothes, and her sorority dues were paid for with my money. Just like the mortgage on a house I will never own has been paid for with my money. For 5 years, I have handed over 70% of my income. Do you know how much that is, Dad? It's over $200,000. The line went completely silent. I could hear their breathing, ragged and panicked. I had laid the numbers bare, and there was no hiding from them. I found the credit cards you opened in my name, Mom. I continued, my voice unwavering. I saw the mortgage refinance, Dad, the one that paid for your new car and that Hawaiian vacation I wasn't invited on. I saw the monthly allowances you paid yourselves from the joint account before any of the bills were covered. You didn't see me as a daughter. You saw me as an income stream. An easy, silent, uncomplaining source of funds so you could give Izzy the world and build your own retirement. A sob broke from my mother. We didn't mean it like that, Ella. We love you. Your love felt an awful lot like invoices, I shot back. This isn't a punishment. This is the logical consequence of your actions. You built a lifestyle you couldn't afford and used me to sustain it. Well, the subsidy has ended. You are adults. You have jobs. Figure it out. Suddenly, I heard a third voice. It was Izzy, her tone saccharine and manipulative. Ella, please, Mom and Dad are really upset. Can't we just talk about this? Whatever you think happened, we can work it out. We're family. Izzy, I said, and for the first time, a touch of pity entered my voice. Enjoy your trip to Europe. It's the last gift you'll ever receive from me. Before any of them could respond, I ended the call. I immediately blocked the unknown number. My hands were shaking and my heart was pounding, but a profound sense of peace washed over me. It was done. The truth was out. The confrontation I had dreaded and anticipated was over. They knew. They finally, truly understood what they had lost. It wasn't their daughter's presence they were mourning, it was the loss of her paycheck. The phone call wasn't about reconciliation. It was a desperate attempt to reconnect the ATM. And for the first time in my life, I had denied their transaction. The weeks following that phone call were a strange mixture of peaceful solitude and chaotic aftershocks. My family, realizing they could no longer reach me directly, began a campaign of indirect communication. They sent emails, which my lawyer had instructed me to forward to her unopened. They tried to get to me through extended family, bombarding my aunts and cousins with their side of the story. A heavily edited narrative where I was a cruel, unstable daughter who had abandoned her loving family over a simple misunderstanding. Some relatives sent me concerned, probing texts. I replied with a simple, polite message. It's a private family matter that is being handled legally. I appreciate your concern, but I will not be discussing it. Jenna was my rock through it all. She helped me screen the messages and provided a much-needed reality check whenever I felt a pang of residual guilt. "They're not sad, Ella," she reminded me one evening as we ate pizza on the floor of my new living room. "They're desperate. They're trying to figure out which emotional lever to pull to make the money start flowing again. Don't let them." She was right. Their messages were never about me, my feelings, my well-being. They were about them, their bills, their stress, their impending financial doom. The biggest news came about a month later, via my lawyer. My parents had been forced to take drastic action. They couldn't afford the mortgage and their lifestyle on their own salaries. They had put the house, my house, as I bitterly thought of it, up for sale. They had to sell it quickly, meaning they likely took a lower offer than they wanted. The new SUV my dad was so proud of was also sold, replaced by a much older, cheaper model. Izzy's grand European tour was unceremoniously canceled. The non-refundable deposits a painful reminder of the life they could no longer afford. I heard from a cousin that Izzy had been forced to get a part-time job to pay for her own expenses, a concept that was apparently utterly foreign to her. A part of me felt a grim satisfaction, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of melancholy. This was the family I had tried so hard to please. Seeing it crumble wasn't a victory, it was a tragedy. But it was a tragedy of their own making. I had not destroyed my family. I had simply stopped being the pillar that held up their dysfunctional, unsustainable structure. It was bound to collapse eventually. I had just decided not to be buried in the rubble. As the months passed, my new life began to take shape, solidifying into something wonderful and real. I thrived in my independence. I decorated my apartment exactly how I wanted, with bold colors and art that I loved. I adopted a cat from a local shelter, a quiet calico I named Pixel, who would curl up on my desk while I worked. I excelled at my job, and without the constant financial and emotional drain, my creativity flourished. I was promoted to a lead designer position, which came with a significant raise, money that was now entirely my own, to save and invest as I saw fit. I started dating, cautiously at first, but eventually I met someone kind and respectful who worked in a completely different field. He was a chef, and his world was beautifully tangible and real. He celebrated my successes, listened intently when I talked about my work, and most importantly, saw me as an equal partner. When he learned about my family situation, he didn't judge or offer easy solutions. He just held my hand and said, "I'm sorry you went through that. Their loss." About a year after I left, I achieved the goal I had been working towards for so long. With the money I had saved, a sum that accumulated with astonishing speed now that it wasn't being siphoned off, I put a down payment on a small condo in the city. It was mine. My name was on the deed. Every payment I made was building my own equity, my own future. Standing in my empty living room on the day I got the keys, the sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt a sense of peace that I had never known. This was real, this was mine, I had built it. I have not spoken to my parents or my sister since that final phone call. My lawyer handles any necessary correspondence, which has dwindled to nothing. I know from social media, through the grapevine of distant relatives, that they moved into a small rental apartment an hour away. My dad is still teaching, my mom still works at the library. Izzy, to her credit, finished her pre-med degree and is now applying to medical schools. Though she is now burdened with student loans, a reality she had never expected to face. Sometimes I wonder if they ever feel remorse. Do they regret their actions, or do they just regret getting caught? Do they miss me, their daughter, or just the comfortable life I provided? I've come to accept that I will likely never know the answers, and that's okay. My focus is no longer on them. It's on my future, on the life I have painstakingly built for myself out of the ashes of their betrayal. I have my own home, a career I'm proud of, a loving partner, and a quiet, happy life. I learned gratitude just as my father wanted me to, but not for the reasons he thought. I'm grateful for my strength, for my friend Jenna's loyalty, and for the painful birthday that finally opened my eyes. They wanted to give my sister the world. In the end, by leaving, I was finally able to give the world to myself.